Hello and welcome to Cherry Red TV and Conscious TV, and my guest today is Arthur Brown. Hi Arthur.
Hi, good to be here.
And the reason that it's on two channels is that I do interviews for both Conscious TV and Cherry Red TV. Arthur is, a lot of his back catalogue is signed to Cherry Red, and we've got lots of CDs out. I'll show you later. But the more I researched Arthur's life, the more I realised he has a strong spiritual side, which also fits on Conscious TV. So we're going to combine the two, and it's going to be about his musical career and also about his spiritual adventures. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is finding more out about Arthur and his fascinating life. And I'm going to start with a quote which I pulled out of a book which was written about you, which I really enjoyed, by Polly Marshall, the God of Hellfire. And the quote goes as follows, Arthur, and this is a quote obviously from you: "How many times I have come away from a gig, head full of stars, ears full of hissing, throat sore with cinders, body tired, but a heart satisfied with song. When I lived, I lived. In the moment of performing, I didn't know how to receive the applause. That was not what I was there for. It was the moment when I was not there. My voice was singing, but I was in bliss." I thought just a beautiful quote.
Oh yeah, it is a sort of paradoxical thing to be on stage, to be performing, to be involved with the audience, and yet also just be that feeling of joy and bliss, you know. And the paradox, particularly in our culture, is you get paid for it. So wonderful, and it is a very beautiful thing to share with the other musicians, and to get to a place where sometimes the whole audience, for a short, maybe even a second, just
They're not there either in one way.
Yeah, they totally go with that energy.
Yes.
And I remember one concert in London, and the MC said, he was trying to think of something to say to introduce me, and he said, "Now, next we got a man who always did exactly what he wanted as far as performing goes." So we did the set, and afterwards I was walking back. I went through the crowd, and then I was going round the back to get to the dressing room, and these three kind of street guys came running over and said, "Whoa, you know, great, man, that was great." And so I said, "Oh, thank you." And he said, yeah, you know, absolutely brilliant." He said, "Of course, it's all very well for you." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you've got talent, you know, so you can be brilliant and you can do what you want, but we can't." I said, What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we ain't got a talent like that." And I said, "Well, it's not like that. You can do it just in your daily life. It's not like everybody's special because they do bits of music or bits of painting or bits of what we call art." And he went, "Ah," and he turns to us and said, "You hear that? We can do it in our daily lives." Whoa! and it was kind of, you know, really lovely just to feel like there was no boundaries, no kind of specialness about anything. It was just you share that moment, and that's if you want to look at it and call it something, it's kind of a freedom.
You being yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what I think I feel from more I research you, that's what you've always done. But let's go through things a little bit sequentially. And when you were young, you spent time. I think your parents were quite damaged by the war, understandably. You spent time walking in the mountains, and you were singing to yourself, often in rhyme. And you were also in a Welsh choir at one time as well. So you found the way of expressing when you were quite young, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, because there was a lot of, sadness in the nation at that point, because every family had kind of lost somebody. And so that I found it disturbing. And singing was a way of it would disappear. Mm-hmm. And when you were out in the hills with nobody there to object or say you weren't doing it right. So yeah, walking in amongst the trees, and there was an interchange between people and other creatures, trees, animals, and everything. And so you can't walk through the trees if you're at all kind of reaching for openness and not be affected by what they are giving you as much as you might be giving out.
And you felt that at that age, you felt that connection with nature.
Yeah, I had one or two really profound experiences of, for instance, walking through a field, and it was it wasn't corn, but it was one of the crops, and when the wind blows through that, you see the great waves moving through it, and so I was drawn into that, and then suddenly found that I no longer was a person. I was the field.
Okay.
And so I lost my individual separateness, if you like, and just became, the consciousness spread out till there was just the field, and I was the field, and all the blades in it, And of course I didn't know what that was. It was just wonderful, but it went.
But it was a deep, incredible experience to have at a young age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And indeed, some of it was possibly brought about, or at least aided, by the fact that my father brought home somebody when I was about 12 or 13, and I came home and there was a different bicycle in the front room. I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, I brought a man home." He said, I know you're, and this is quite an amazing thing for a father to say to a child at that age, "You're finding it difficult to be in this family. So I brought this man, he's going to teach you to empty your mind, and then it won't be so painful." And that's what he did.
Wow. Huh.
So, well, whatever difficulties I had with my father, they don't feature in very large.
And then when you were around 11, your mother took you to a Billy Graham concert, being that obviously Billy Graham, the American evangelist.
Yeah.
Something happened there, didn't it?
It did. I mean, it was a lot of the kind of painfulness, and you look for a unity again, like you used to have before you started thinking, and so in terms of what I knew and had been in touch with, apart from later the meditation, the Christian ideas were the ones that I'd seen for spiritual reality and everything. And so when my mother went to see Billy Graham and took me, there was already a kind of, this might be something along the way that I want to reach for. And of course he was a very charismatic person, whatever one felt about his publicity or anything. As a direct person able to influence people, he was quite amazing.
Mm.
So I found myself on my knees going, hey! And that was kind of a taste of something to do with unity, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, later I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm not sure about that.
And then you were also writing poetry when you were young, and you wrote a poem called The Fire Poem.
I did.
Which became later some of the lyrics of the song Fire.
Yeah. In fact, the poem that comes just before Fire on the album, is the spoken one with the really heavy riff. That's it.
Ah, okay.
So that was all the words came then.
Yeah.
And it was because, you know, in those days there was radio. There wasn't yet TV when I was young. I think when I was about 12 we got the first TV, and we were amongst the first by that time I was living in Leeds. So one of the entertainments at that point was to have a big fire going in the kitchen, 4 clothes horses, which were two.
I remember. We had the same, yeah.
And they opened out. So at the junction, you know, 2 here, 2 there, 2 there, 2 there, and each of the junctions there was a person sitting, and so you just look at the fire.
Yes.
And when you watch flames and the fire gradually getting hotter and hotter, and then you get to be able to see, because it all settles and you can see the heart of the fire, and it doesn't move like the rest of the fire, and you find that you're in something that doesn't move.
Yeah.
And then that's an analogy for, you know, what doesn't move in the whole of life. And so I found that the fire was a doorway. And so when poems came up, sometimes fire would be featured in them.
Yeah. And you had a musical influence because your father played the jazz piano.
Yes.
So that obviously helped you in terms of the music side. And then you had some classical training, but I think what was quite important was you met Vincent Crane, didn't you? Who became a keyboard player in your first band.
Yes. I stayed at the lodging, the Bohemian lodging, of his girlfriend's mother. And he used to come over to rehearse with his own little band, and also with 2 people who were teaching this young Indian man how to sing their songs. And that was Peter Carr and Michael Finesilver, who were the co-writers of Fire. So it all happened in that little Bohemian. We all met quite by accident.
Yeah.
And Vincent, of course, was an amazing keyboard player, as well as a conductor.
So he was classically trained, isn't he?
Yeah, Trinity School of Music.
Yeah, yeah.
And he could write, arrange, compose, you know, and his improvising capacity was astonishing.
And you had a few singles out first, and the second single that I didn't realise this was called Devil's Grip.
Yes.
And that was then later felt to be the influence on the early metal bands like Black Widow and Ozzy Osbourne's Black Sabbath.
Yes.
And I suppose at the time you didn't realise that you were already having influence, because your influence over the years was extraordinary on many successful artists.
Yes.
But so I suppose my question is, there was obviously a unique creativity coming through you. Was that at all connected with the spiritual experiences you had when you were younger, did you think?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And from the fact that coupled with my the meditation formless meditation that I was taught, meant that when I wanted to write the first album you write because it's the things you love and you want to sing about them.
Yeah.
Well, for me, that was what I'd learned how to look at things from a different way. And so I wanted to illustrate that. And I thought, well, if I'm going to look at, for instance, if I take fire, then fire is a portal through to the world of the spirit. It's a shamanic thing, if you like. But how am I going to talk about that to people? Well, if I put two characters, one the god of hellfire, one the god of pure fire, and they both sing the sort of opposite songs, then that would give people more of a touch. And then for the album, it went on from there. It was kind of a man who was looking at the world, finding it to be totally insane. So tries to find the wholeness that he used to know as a child, and then goes through and meets the different aspects of it in the form of different characters.
Yes.
So then when it came to live, before the single came out, we were performing it, but we didn't get very many gigs because people thought, oh, it's R&B and blues, but what's that nonsense that he's singing about, you know? And why has they injected bits of classical into it? Oh. And so then I thought, oh, if I put costumes on, and this, out of a conversation with another guy who lived in that bohemian household, an artist, Mike Reynolds, we would discuss all the pagan things together and the symbols. And so then they began to appear all over the costumes and body paint. And then that was a way that people could know that, oh, well, it's got a great rhythm, I like it, but I'm watching something else.
Yeah, because it was basically the first concept album, wasn't it? The Crazy World of Arthur Brown album, but it's regarded as pretty much the first concept album.
Some people have regarded it as that.
Yes.
It was it was a concept album. Well, Robert Masters, who was our booker, he said that the only historical precedent he could see was in jazz. You sometimes had what they called tone poems. And so I looked at that and I thought, yeah, you could describe it that way.
Yeah.
It wasn't, although it was a character going down meeting other characters, it wasn't kind of an opera as such, although we borrowed certain things from operas because they had been the ones seriously talking about the spiritual realms. And so there was an echo of that in the structure of the music as well.
And you were signed to Track Records, and the album was co-produced by Pete Townsend and Kit Lambert.
Yes.
So that must have been, because Pete Townsend had that strong spiritual side. Kit Lambert was pretty out. I never met Kit Lambert, but he was pretty out there by the sound of it. So you had a very interesting mix of people involved.
He was out there, and his father was a well-known classical composer.
Okay, this is Kit Lambert's father?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Kit was a very, very widely studied man, and he also had a great taste in music and a great taste for what was happening in art. You know, it was through his agency that the Who became so involved in op art, and you know, so Kit would say to you things like, and this was before Devil's Grip came out. Yeah. He said, this thing you've got, this what you're doing in the stage, I'm going to tell you something now which you may not believe. And I said, oh, what's that, Kit? And he said, very soon there's going to be other groups copying this. And I said, oh no, Kit, you know, it's a kind of one-off. Look around, that's not what people are doing. But sure enough, he was right. And the other thing about Kit was, which he influenced Pete and Hendrix with, was he would say to you, okay, so now the public have made you popular. Public have given you a big hit. Now, because of that, you have a duty to them. You know, and at first you just think, oh, what is he talking about? But it did influence the way that you perceived it, and you were more aware of the fact that you were giving a service, which helped you to deal with the pressures of fame and stuff like that.
Because Fire became number one all over the world. It was number one in America, number one in UK, a lot of Europe. So that really projected you from being a kind of cult band with a few people coming to someone everyone knew you, and you looked eccentric, you looked different. So I guess everywhere you went, people knew you.
Yes.
It's a huge change, isn't it?
It is. It's quite. On the one hand, you know, well, I'm a bit like Jack the Lad, aren't I?
No, but on the outside, it's a huge change. Yeah.
Yeah. Even internally, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, particularly when Fire was a hit in America, a lot of people, because the album was about spiritual things and duality and stuff, they would be in my room, in the hotel room. In those days, it was more lax, you know. So I'd get back and there'd be people in, and they'd want to know about life and death and the meaning of everything, you know. And of course, initially, you pontificate and think, well, you know, I'm not only a rock star, I'm a guru now. This is brilliant. And then, then I suppose if you're lucky, something hits you and you suddenly realise, oh, nah, don't know that. Which you did.
And because you're on the same label, you're on the same label as the Heartbreakers, who I used to love, who used to see them a lot play in London, Jimi Hendrix, the Who were involved, obviously, Thunderclap Newman, you were with these amazing people. And Hendrix actually talked at one point about you singing in his band, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah, that was, we did some evenings down Steve Paul's club in New York. And Jimmy liked to play bass, and given the option, he wouldn't sing. So there were times when I found myself on stage with Jimmy playing bass, John Lee Hooker and Frank Zappa playing guitar.
Wow.
And John Lee Hooker was a big hero of mine. You know, so just, wow, I'm now standing next to this man who taught me so much, and I'm singing with him. It's wonderful. And of course, with Hendrix, the energy was just phenomenal, particularly when it was a free jam.
Yeah.
You know, that was where he absolutely excelled at free jams. He could go because he was really a person who loved flowing in social things, in everything else, in women, and so the energy would just come out, and you wouldn't do songs at all that were already written.
Yeah.
You just, and so it worked, and so he called me over to his hotel and said, "Look, I'm now wanting to move on, and what I would like to do is I want to get together a project where we have large-scale projections visually. We have tapes of Wagner playing in the background, and then we are up front with this theatrical type presentation." So it was a huge thing he was thinking of, and he was already writing some pieces of the instrumental parts of it, which was quite an interesting thing, how he did it. Because when I went in, the floor was littered with, music script pages with maybe 3 or 4 notes on. And he'd get so far and go, no, not that. And he'd just throw it away.
Yeah.
And then he'd start a completely new sheet. And when I look at it, I was introduced to Townsend and to Kit Lambert by a fellow called John Fenton, who was an amazing man behind the scene. He was the first publicist for the Beatles. And he introduced me to them saying, you've got to look at this because it's performance art. Now that was a very early time to be talking about performance art. And the thing was that Kit and Chris were both wanting to make films. They were filmmakers. And so when they saw my act, they said, right, we can do this. And so I got my first tour in America through playing down UFO and through Bill Graham being there, and he took me over and toured me the film halls and things. And while I was on tour, for the second time with Bill Graham, I got a telegram from Pete Townsend, and he said, we are considering the single now, the album is finished, and we are tossing up between Give Him a Flower, which was a song where I took the piss out of the whole hippie scene, and they loved to sing it, the hippies too, and Fire. And he said, we are greatly leaning towards thinking that the darker image is one that we can just go to town with. And that was how it got chosen. Yeah. We were quite happy being a comedy band as well. But
how did the whole makeup thing come together? Because that influenced Kiss, Alice Cooper, and so many other people. It hadn't been done before.
Well, it was a accumulation of things. My professional career started in Paris in 1965, and it was the beginning of the R&B, English R&B invasion over there, and of the tones from America of some of the underground, Flower Power and things, and Floral Jackets and things like that. And one night when I was performing, it was a very successful thing, and we had queues quarter of a mile around outside of the building. So suddenly, after being in England doing support gigs at the Marquee, being whisked over to Paris by the guy who produced Go Now, who needed to avoid tax situation here. So he said, would you like to start a rock empire in Paris? I said, yeah. He said, well, you've got 6 days. So we went over, put a band together. And one evening, in that club, which was called the Bus Palladium, a young mother walked in with her child who was about 7. And he looked at me and he said, you know, you should black out your teeth. Obviously a child that had been exposed to theatre or something, or with a macabre imagination. I said, what? He said, yeah, you should black out your teeth. Oh, well. So the next night, I thought, well, all right. And we got some, makeup sticks. And I blacked out my teeth. And then we got the guy to shine the light bright enough. And everything just stopped suddenly. And I went, and there was no teeth in there. And so the audience loved it. And so I thought, makeup, eh? Right. And then a couple of weeks later, I was in staying in a hotel in Montmartre, and the ladies of the night used to stay there as well. So they had wild parties, and one morning I woke up, opened my door, and there was a crown with candles. So I took that down that night. With the black teeth,
okay.
It was the prototype fire helmet.
Yeah, which you became known for, of course.
Exactly, yeah.
Fire, and you caught fire a few times as well, didn't you?
Oh, well, and there's still the scorch marks on some of the clubs.
Yeah, wouldn't be allowed now.
No,
yeah,
not at all. Not in small, in the larger spaces, we still get away with it.
You do, yeah. And then Carl Palmer joined the band as drummer, because he went on to great things, obviously, later.
Well, we had a history with drummers up to then, because Dracian Thika was our drummer. He came in from another band called Winder Cave Frog, which was popular up in around Manchester. And he went wild, so we had to get rid of him.
It was too wild even for you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
As far as the performance went, he was quite happy to destroy the whole performance. And after a while, Vincent was the one who said, either him or me. And that was in the middle of an American tour. We were very awkward, and he wouldn't back down. So I needed all the chords, so I had to let go of the drummer, who was becoming impossible.
Yeah.
He went on to play with Arthur Lee and Graham Bond and people like that. When it came to the album, Dracian was on most of it, but Lambert, when he was trying to get it placed in America, the Americans did not like Dracian's drumming style in certain aspects. So he got in, Lambert got in, John Heisman, who of course
Colosseum,
yeah. And had been one of England's top jazz drummers, and also John Marshall, who was after the initial Soft Machine, in the second Soft Machine he was the drummer, the more jazzy type.
Yeah.
He'd been playing with Alexis Corner and was one of the top jazz drummers. And so Lambert had them do versions. Now, on the Fire album, John Marshall played Spell on You, he played Child of My Kingdom, and he also did a version of Fire. John Heisman did a version of Fire. Now, Lambert is dead and nobody knows who it was because he took the final mix. Yeah. So we don't know which one he put in. I think it's Dracian, but they both were given Dracian's drumming, the other two, as the template. So nobody knows who did it, which is wonderful. And then
Carl Palmer.
Yeah,
and of course, he then, after a time, left with Vincent Crane to form Atomic Rooster.
Yes.
Did you feel that was a blow for you when that happened?
I was in another world altogether.
Yeah, okay.
I had just turned down, which is why they left, $250,000 from Clive Davis.
Yeah.
And
who was then at CBS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had played him one tune. He said, "Oh, sounds too much like Tom Jones." So we did another one, and he said, "That's it. I can get a number one with that." And then I had these there was the Gorham Hotel. On about the 40th floor was Clive, and on about the 12th floor was Kit and Chris, who came over. And they had, by that time, we later realised, started to go down their own drug routes. And it was falling apart in a way that left us, for instance, in the middle of America with not a cent. And so I decided, and the rest of the band, about time to move on. But when they came, they said, "Look, if you want to move on management-wise, we can understand that. But as a record company, we're the ones that put you up there.
Yes.
You know, and we don't think it's fair. And I kind of looked at it, and I thought, actually, I think that's right. And nowadays you'd consider it a bad business decision.
Well, there's a quote that I pulled out again in the book, which is a quote from you. It's back here somewhere. It's like, as you said, we didn't want to, I think you said this, we didn't want to become mainstream. We wanted to do what we wanted to do. And you were doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
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 So I need to move on a bit. Otherwise we'll end up with 15 parts of the interview. You were this time, you were also playing stadiums at this point, weren't you? With 20,000 people in stadiums, it really was a quantum shift. And then you formed a band, Kingdom Come. You did 3 albums, all of which were kind of entirely different. I've listened to all 3; they're very different. And the one I like the most actually is the Galactic Zoo dossier, which I've got here somewhere. Yes. And that, just talk briefly about the concept behind that. I thought that was a fascinating concept.
Well, it came on the back of, you know, going over to America, seeing Vietnam vets riddled with bullets on the screen, which you wouldn't see in England at that time. Just really disturbing things. You know, both the Kennedys assassinated, Martin Luther King. It was a very time of change. It was a time when Ronald Reagan wanted to put the hippies, all of them, in a concentration camp. That'll deal with them, you know. And there was the Kent State riots. So that, and the fact that this thing, the hippie movement and the hippie music, which did produce some absolutely wonderful things, but was also, in a lot of cases, financed by the mafia. So right there, you've got a strange bedfellows. And to see, like, many people sort of taken away with money. Just, now we can do this and that and the other, and there's thousands and thousands of pounds. You know, that kind of, I suppose, is inevitable. But all of that, I wanted to show, you know, somewhat the hippie ideals, but also what happens when money, old school politics, war comes into that picture of, well, how do you go to a new place when that's happening? And of course, some of that is, you hope to do it through technology. So there's one track there called The Multiracial Transplant Man. With a 15-nation brain, I'm fuss-proof, non-political, and my nerves just won't feel pain. They've set my pleasure pattern to a constant state of bliss. My waste products evaporate, so I don't need to shit or piss. And it goes on, you know, and so it was trying to encapsulate all of that in one album.
You talked about humanity living in a zoo being controlled by commercial and religious forces.
I think it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, wow. It's very accurate, actually. And then the second album was loosely based on the theme of water.
Yeah.
What was your thinking there?
Well, it was, we were kind of experimenting with living together. We're doing all kinds of things together. And so there was a feeling of flowing. And also, you know, I was conscious of the fact that we'd had the fire album, so we'd have a water album. And the ability of something like water to break down things which seem a lot more powerful and stronger than it. And so the kind of spiritual energy being one that might temporarily seem quashed, as it did seem to have happened. Suddenly everything was commercial again, and a lot of the hippies have been put in jail or mysteriously died and things. And without being a conspiracy theorist, it was a stated policy of the governments to make sure that doesn't get too big.
Yeah.
So that force of being able to ride that and come out the other side. So suddenly you had people who'd just been doing free-form spiritual stuff. There were courses from the spiritual traditions of the world. They all, you had Arica from Chile, you had the Gurdjieff movement from Georgia, Armenia, you had, movement after movement, Subud, all giving, or mostly anyway, giving courses that lasted for 3 months to a year, and that's where a lot of the hippies disappeared. And in a lot of cases, at the end of the courses, the inculcation was, right, now go out and earn money and see how you deal with that now. And so that was kind of.
Do you think people who were buying the albums were aware of all the intricacies that you had in there in terms of because in a way what you've just described is a lot of depth in it.
Well, I think, if you take an image like the God of Hellfire, for a lot of people it was nutty art, a good bit of
Theatre.
fun, theatre.
Yeah.
He was a bit mad, he's a nutter. Great, like nutters, so let him be nutty, but not going to look at any meaning.
Yeah. But you were obviously putting a lot of, or effort's probably the wrong word because it was your passion, but you were expressing a great depth lyrically, and that those lyrics through music as well. And I just wonder how many people were picking up on that. Once I read what Galactic Zoo dossier was about, it made it much more interesting for me.
Yeah, well, it was coupled with the fact that we didn't do fire in the act. And so we were collecting a new audience. Some of the people came, but we were creating a new audience. So we were right down at the bottom again of a new underground that was a different, it wasn't a hippie underground.
Yes.
And so those people did know what it was about. And we didn't become a huge commercial success. We were influential, but not a big.
Yeah, in a way it was quite brave of you because you had the success with Fire, number one. You were playing to 20,000 people, and then you, as you say, you didn't even play Fire on stage. It's kind of, you're almost reinventing yourself again.
Yeah.
And
there was a little band in between, the Puddletown Express.
That's right, yes.
Which featured Dracian Thika, the drummer that was kicked out, came back, and he was then drumming with Gabriel Roth, who invented all the 5 rhythms stuff.
Yes.
And in that one, that was where I said, oh, well, let's throw out the costumes. I'm bored with that, and let's throw out songs. And so we improvised all the music, and like as not, I performed naked. So, it was like, so the people would come along from the ones who'd been in watching the fire with the costumes and go like, oh, what is this? So, but like you say, it was what I wanted to do.
Because the third Kingdom Come album, Journey, that was the hardest for me to listen to because it was just very unstructured. It's just one, what I would call a song in there. The rest of it is, well, it was early use of drum machines, wasn't it? People hadn't really done that before. Again, that was you at the beginning of something.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it was born of necessity as well as interest, in that the then drummer, we had, I think, 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks to go to a series of concerts, and he called up and said, "I'm up in the north of England with the van and one of the band's wife, and I'm not coming back." So we just, not another. We'd had a series of drummers.
Yeah.
So we just, that was it. I thought, I'll play the drum machine.
So on the spiritual side, the next thing I picked up on was Shivapur, if I pronounce this right, Shivapur Baba,
Yes.
who had a thing called the decision exercise. And he died at the age of 137. Did you actually meet him?
No.
No, but it was a teaching that you got from him. Yeah.
From J.G. Bennett, who was the man
Yes.
who put the Gurdjieff school together.
So you'd already known J.G. Bennett at that time.
Let me see.
It doesn't really matter the detail.
Wait a minute. No, yes, by the time Journey came, I had met Bennett.
Yeah. So just talk us through that, because J.G. Bennett, I never met him. Obviously, he's dead now, but for me, he's quite legendary in a way, because he was the man that was one of the people that was instrumental with helping with the Gurdjieff teachings, keep the Gurdjieff teachings alive.
And also brought the Subud movement to England.
Yes.
And was there at the first Glastonbury. He slept overnight in his little tent, and as was Richard Field, who...
Oh, right. Field, yeah.
As was, I mean, they were all there.
Yeah.
At that first Glastonbury, it was a spiritual nexus, things. But...
So what drew you to Bennett and the Gurdjieff teachings?
Well, actually, it's very strange. When I was at Reading University, we used to do Ouija boards and things like that. But I got to meet a guy there who was visiting someone else called Potter. He had red hair. And he lived in Upper Dicker Hike, which was round the Sussex area. And I went to meet him, and he showed me one thing that they did, which was called a stop exercise, where I might be getting up and he'd go, "Stop!" And you
freeze.
Yeah, and then you have to be aware of all your body can do, what's going through your mind at that moment, And so I thought, that's interesting. But I didn't really get in touch with any. I got Gurdjieff's book, but it made no sense to me.
This is the Bibelbub book, was it?
Yeah, Beelzebub's Tales to His Queens.
That's a long haul, that one. It's a difficult haul, that one, yeah.
Well, you have to he created a language in that, so you have to learn that language. But I just read about 5 pages, 9, and then when Kingdom Come got to the Journey section, we were about halfway through that year, and we did a concert in Switzerland, Lake Geneva. And so I was sitting on the rock by the lake there, and I was just thinking, I've tried everything I can with the band to make the breakthrough that I need to do internally, and I can't do it. So I thought maybe I'll go to India and find somebody over there. That seems to be the good place. So I'm sitting there thinking like this, and I've decided already I will break up the band and see what I can come up with next. And I'm in the middle of that when the young guy, Jeremy Thomas, who later did Cube Records, Fly Records,
I used to know Jeremy Thomas.
Oh,
Yeah.
you did? Okay.
Yeah. I say used to. I haven't been in touch with him for a few years. Yeah.
Well, he was he had his finger in many little pies.
Yeah.
So he came and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to break out the band." He said, "Oh, why is that?" And I said, "Well, I need to make this." "Oh, you could do it with the band, surely." "No, I've tried it, and so what are you going to do?" And I said, "Oh, I think I'm going to go to India." And he said, "Before you go to India, you should go to this place in Gloucestershire." And he said, "I'll introduce you to this guy, somebody Harrison it was, who was a photographer who went there regularly." And so he said, "You get in touch with him." And so I got in touch with him, and he said, "Oh, you must go down there. When they meditate down there, they're 3 foot off the ground." And I thought, oh yeah. But nevertheless,
This must be TM. Is it?
no, it wasn't TM.
Okay,
It was the Gurdjieff stuff.
Okay.
Which, and so I went down there expecting. I knew he was an older man because he was about 72 then. A turbaned fellow, and every. So I got there and tweed jacket, dirty old trousers on, and but he was able to explain to me certain dreams I'd had, and made sense out of a lot of things that had been kind of troubling me, and then declared that if I came, he would set me on the path to absolute liberation. Oh, fantastic, I'll do that. So I went down to see him dressed as John the Baptist. I had all my robes and stuff on. And then he was quite remarkable.